All right, everyone, we're going live, and bear with me as I make sure that all of the connections are there. I'm hearing myself. Fantastic. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. I just want to make sure that we're not getting an echo during our wonderful conversation. And I'd like to welcome all of you here to Association Chat. Listen, this is the place to be if you want to find out what's going on in the association industry and learn from thought leaders every week. We go live every Tuesday, usually at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. But this week, it's special. This week is a special edition. And that's because we're coming to you with a speaker you didn't expect, and we're coming to you with a time that you didn't expect. So 4 p.m.
Surprise.
Eastern Time. Yes, surprise on Tuesday. Welcome to Association Chat, your weekly online discussion for the association community where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the host of Association Chat, Kiki L'Italienne, and I want to give a shout out to our wonderful sponsor, Fontiva. Yes, the AMS for Innovation, for their ongoing support of Association Chat and the community here. If you're on Crowdcast, you can click the little call to action button to check out their blog for the association community. Or if you're listening to this later on iTunes, you can just visit fontiva.com. And for today's show, my friends, we are talking with Thom Singer about what he has called the paradox of potential. Now, Thom, you need to know this. Thom is a professional keynote speaker. He's a master of ceremonies. He also does small meeting facilitation. He's married to a meeting planner, and he's the author of 12 books on the power of business development, networking, entrepreneurship, legal marketing, and presentation skills. Oh my gosh. Did I also fail to mention that he is the host of Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do podcast? He regularly speaks at business and association conferences around the United States. And here he is today with us. Welcome to the show, Thom.
Well, you read that bio. This is the most exciting part of the bio, is I'm here on Association Chat with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited that you're here. Yeah. So the paradox of potential. It's a compelling title, but I wanted to find out a little bit more about, what prompted it, because the paradox of potential, you're digging into what happens with the way people set their goals, the potential that they have, and how they meet it or fail to meet it, and what happens in between. But before we jump into that, I want to find out what compelled you to look into this. Like, what started you on this journey?
So last year in 2016, I actually was working on a project. I was trying to write a one-man show. And I invested not a lot of time, but some serious time in trying to put together a somewhat entertaining, but also sort of educational show, sort of a business-oriented one-man show. It was something I thought, like, some of these conferences I work at will have like 5 or 6 keynote speakers, and I thought, gosh, what if you could do something different? So I came up with this concept, and it never really reached its full potential, if you will. But the main character of the one-man show was my own childhood imaginary friend. Now, I don't know if you had an imaginary friend, but I actually had one. Like, there's a commercial right now running, I think, for Jif peanut butter, where the mom like takes a bite out of the sandwich and puts it there. My aunt used to make an extra sandwich for Chucky, my imaginary friend, and leave dog biscuits for his dogs, and then take a bite. I think I was the one. I would take a bite and then put it down and go, look, Chucky ate part of his sandwich. So the theory of the one-man show was Chucky 50 years later, and how he was disappointed in me that I hadn't always lived up to my potential. I was a really creative kid. I wanted to be an actor. And then I sort of fell into being very corporate and sort of put my ladder against that corporate wall. And now in the end, working as a speaker, I get to sort of have a lot of that stuff I wanted about being an actor or a performer. But I was in my mid-40s before I started doing that. So a lot of the play was about how maybe I waited a long time to realize some of my potential. And it led me to doing a bunch of research. So I started reading all these studies out of Harvard and Carnegie Mellon and all these other schools about potential, and then things like that Gallup had done about people in the workforce and how companies sort of identify who their high potential employees are. And if you've worked for a big company, they often have hypo programs, but they've gone back and studied now 30 years later of these programs. And oftentimes the people who were chosen to be the high potential employees and given special training are not the leaders of the company. And so I sort of started off doing a little bit of research about just potential in general. And I started finding all this business information about why people miss the mark when either they themselves think they have a lot of potential or their boss thinks they have a lot of potential. So I started an online survey, and I've interviewed over 250 people, and it's not a big scientific survey. I've had a couple PhDs come and tell me how I need to change it, so I'm working on tweaking it a little bit. But what's really interesting is how many people are telling me across industry lines, across job titles, that they have more potential in their career and that they feel like they could be accomplishing more. And I could relate to that because I've always felt that. So I started looking at it in my own speaking business, the potential that I had when I set off, where I thought I would be 8 years later, and the reality, and I'm doing really well, but there was still a gap between what I thought the potential was and the actual results. So I started interviewing some people one-on-one about, how do you feel about this and why? Why do you think you've been held back? And so that's how it all got started. And I sort of stumbled into it. The one-man show got shelved. I did a read-through for a bunch of my friends. About 30 people came to a theater and watched me. I didn't act it out, but I read kind of script in hand. And they all came back and said that the concept was really good, but I had to do some work. One of the things that all 30 people said is my childhood imaginary friend's name was Chucky. And if you're over 40, that is a murderous doll.
Yes.
Even though my Chucky preceded the murdering doll Chucky of the 70s or 80s horror films, I was going to have to change his name. And so I think he's becoming Lucky. But
Lucky, Chucky.
Lucky, not Chucky. But it's sort of this ongoing thing. They had a bunch of suggestions, so I percolated on it for a while. But this research that I started spawned this whole other keynote, and I've actually done it in keynote form, in workshop form, and then at board retreats, I'll do like a 45 or an hour presentation on this gap between potential and results, and then we'll say, what about your association for next year? And we'll whiteboard what the potential is for the following year, and then where they think the gap is going to be. So it's actually become sort of a couple of different things. I wouldn't say by accident, because I was pretty intentional about it, but it came about. I wasn't looking for the topic, and the topic sort of found me, and it's related really well to my clients.
That's so interesting. I love that story because I feel like some of the best, some of the best talks I've heard, some of the best sort of programs that are out there, it's not like you set out to do exactly that thing, but it's almost like it was given to you, like you stumble across it and it captured you. And so I love that idea. And so why don't you tell me a little bit more? So you this idea captured you, you created this talk. Okay, so in producing the keynote and then this sort of program and workshop that you do. Is it a workshop? Do you do a workshop with it? Sounds like it kind of.
Yeah, it's sort of, like the board retreat facilitation or a workshop. I've done it both as a breakout and in that board situation and as a keynote. So it changes because the purpose of each of those is very different, how interactive they get, et cetera. But yeah, it can fall into all of them. And even the keynote is very interactive because I'll ask the audience, why do they think the gap exists? And I'll let them feed out why. And then we'll take whatever they said, because I've come up with about 10 different reasons that these 250 people who've taken the quiz have told me sort of why they're being held back or what's keeping them from reaching their potential. And yet they fall into 3 buckets. I mean, there's 10 different ones, and there's actually 30 different ones, but it's just the way people phrase things. I've narrowed it down to 10, but they fall into 3 buckets. And the buckets are the plan. So people don't really know what they're doing in their job. They don't have the goals. And I actually, when I became a speaker, long before I was a professional speaker, but when I started just speaking on business 15 years ago, I started speaking about goal setting. I mean, that was my original topic. So I found it fascinating that the first bucket really comes down to people don't feel that they have a real clear roadmap or a real clear plan. And there's a couple things that fall into there. And then the second thing that falls into is sort of what Simon Sinek would call your why. So it's sort of purpose. People go to work plan their events, they go through the motions, but they don't really feel they know why they're doing it. And so a lot of it falls to that purpose. So it's plans and purpose. And then the third bucket pleasantly surprised me because it's all about people. And if anybody knows me, I've been speaking about your network and your brand and how you get people more engaged in their community or more engaged at the conferences that we put on for a decade. I mean, I built my whole career around being the conference catalyst and getting people to embrace in a world where everybody wants to be on their phone, getting people to embrace people. And what people are telling me, they're being held back because of their boss. Their boss is holding them back. Their spouse or their loved ones are telling them they're not worthy. They don't have the right team to support them. Or they've never had a mentor. So there's all these things that fall into that people box. And that sort of excited me that it was plan, purpose, and people. So that's sort of where the research took me. And then there's 10 steps that people have given me on how you can actually focus and bridge that gap. Although I have my own theory, and that is that you can't build a bridge across the gap. The gap between potential and results exists for a lot of people, not for everybody. Some people feel they're kicking ass and they're doing, or can I say that? They're kicking toe.
Totally
they're kicking ass. And some people feel that way and they don't see that there's a gap. But most people see that gap. But what I tell people is if you build a bridge across, as you cross that bridge, you're going to end up with more potential because you're going to meet new people, you're going to learn new things. So your potential is going to shift. So if you focus on building the bridge first and then going, I don't think you're just going to fall into oblivion. So what I tell people is to build a lattice or a scaffolding and know that it's never done and you just keep adding pieces to it.
So I just had this weird insect fly across my screen. How insane. So what I wanted to ask you is, have you applied some of these things that you've discovered? I mean, one of the things that I've found in some of the work that I do is that as you're doing this research, you end up being able to apply some of the things that you learn, or you look back and you realize, oh, that does work because I applied that. I've done that in the past and I know it works. So do you have any examples of that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk numbers, or I don't want to be like braggadocious, like, look at me, aren't I cool? But my business.
You can totally do that. You can totally do that on this show, especially right now.
That's right. But my business is up by maybe 50% over 2016. Wow. And 2016 was the best year I'd had. Now it was somewhat flat over 15, but it was up by like $1 or something. But it's way up this year. And a lot of other speakers have been like, why? Why are you, not quite doubling, but upwards of that? Why are you working so much more and working with much, more amazing clients just in the size and scope of the events that I've been the master of ceremonies at, or the keynote speaker at, or groups that have brought me in to facilitate. It's the year I've always wanted since I started the business 8 years ago. And somebody asked me why, and I said, part of it, I think, in our business of being a speaker and being a vendor in the meetings industry, I think a lot of it is longevity. So part of it has to go with the fact that you've actually been out there working for 8 years, people feel safe hiring you. I think that's part of it. But the other part is that I've followed many of these steps. I mean, I can just kind of go over the 10 steps that have sort of come out of this, and it's not rocket science. I mean, this is just what people are telling me.
You've got to give us the 10 steps. You realize that. Okay.
Well, and I'll give them to you. I have to read them, but but I wrote them down because I figured I've listened to your show. I knew you were going to ask me.
I need to know the good stuff.
I knew you were going to want the tips. This is not a fluffy show. I'm quite aware.
No, it's not. I know.
But I've put a lot of these into practice because I'm researching them and I'm talking to people about them, and then you can't help but thinking, oh, my own I'm kind of that stupid. I don't do that. So and a lot of people will tell me, well, Thom, these are pretty basic. What I ask people is, are you doing these things if you feel you have a gap? And so the first one is you just got to take ownership of your own life. You can't sit there and say, oh, it's me, I'm not famous, or I don't have a New York Times bestseller, or all the reasons that a lot of people get business in my world. You just take ownership of it. You just decide, okay, this is who I am. I'm not famous, but I work and I do a good job. I have to take ownership for where I screw up, or if a client loves me or doesn't love me. I have to own that. I can't point my finger at a sound person or anything else. And so I think I've always done that, but that's the first one that comes up. The second one is set really clear goals, which, like I said, I think I've always done. But here's where it gets interesting for me. The third one is you have to work past the fear. And this is a scary business. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, it's scary to be on your show because you know there's going to be people watching you and judging you, and there'll be people like, I don't like him or whatever.
Oh, stop.
You got to put
They
yourself.
all love you. There is one thing I want to say really quickly, though, just because this is really, really good. I think that the microphone's kind of hitting up against your shirt a little bit occasionally. So I want to make sure that it's perfect.
I think I'm only wearing one earphone. I think I was tapping the other earphone.
Oh, that might be it. Okay.
Yeah,
so
number 2.5 is don't tap the extra earphone on the table.
Yeah. So yeah, just for the audio, just for the podcast later that's audio, I want to make sure that everybody can hear you clearly. So awesome. Yeah. Okay.
I'll sit on my hand. So
okay.
Number 3 is you got to work past the fear. And I was kind of joking that it's scary to do anything, but you have to, fear can paralyze us. And there's a lot of people who I've talked to who don't take basic actions on a daily basis because they're scared of what's going to happen. And what fascinates me is a lot of people are scared of what's going to happen if they succeed. And so you have to be aware of that fear.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 is you got to network like crazy. And people think that in this world where a like, a link, a share, and a follow means something, you have to do more than that. You can't just, follow someone on Twitter. You have to engage them. Now, there's a million ways you can do that. But if you don't make connecting a priority, you're not going to have that sort of advantage. Number 5, and this one surprised me, and I don't think I do a good job of it, is you have to be really aggressive with the way you show your gratitude. And the aggressive part came from one of the people I interviewed. And she said that what helped her kind of get across that gap is she went back and researched everyone who had helped her get to where she was in her career. And she aggressively showed gratitude. And I was like, what do you mean by aggressively? She said, I didn't just send him a text that said THX 4, the number 4, helping me. She said, I really went out of my way and did things for people, whether it was taking them out to dinner, whether it was, buying them a bottle of wine, whether it was promoting the crap out of them, to let them know I appreciated them. She goes, the more aggressive I was with gratitude, the more business I got. And
wow.
I started doing some of that probably more than I've done in the past. Number 6 is easy. You've got to do good work. Yep. Number 6, you've got to deliver on all projects. You've got to do good work. I hope I don't have a problem with that one, but you've got to be very clear that, hard work is the ticket into the game. And so many people have said that, that's one of the things that's held them back is that they've skated on some things that they've done. Number 7 is you got to accept that change is going to happen. I mean, look at the meetings business. In the 8 years I've been working as a speaker, I have seen, a pendulum go across and back as to what people are looking for as far as content and the quality and the style of the speakers. And it changes. And you just have to realize that whatever you do, that I don't like the book, Who Moved My Cheese, but you have to realize the cheese is going to get moved constantly. And you had better be watching for it. It's the old adage of, skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it is. Yeah, you have to do that. Number 8 is you have to ask other people for help. And so this year I have a mastermind group with some other speakers, and I just got really raw and asked them, what did they think I needed to do? And it was some little things like you needed to have a new PowerPoint design. You needed to take it up a notch. You were going to be on bigger stages. You needed to buy new suits. And you don't like your friends telling you that your suits are baggy, but I lost 30 pounds. And they're like, you need to go buy all new clothes. And it's expensive to buy clothes, and I'm cheap. But I asked for help, and then I had to listen to the advice that I got. Number 9 is try new things. And one of the things I started to do on such a micro, non-business basis, but it's been awesome, is on Mondays when I go to Starbucks, I tell the barista they get to pick my drink. I call it Barista's Choice Day. And it reminds
I love that.
It reminds me to try new things. So I always get a grande non-fat vanilla latte, like every single time for the last 10 years that Starbucks has existed in my town or anywhere I travel. And so on Mondays, I tell them, I don't want one of the regular drinks that are on the menu. I want something I've probably never had. And Kiki, you've never seen a 20-year-old person behind the counter be more perplexed. It freaks them out to give them that much power. And I will tell you, I've learned some things that peppermint and caramel shouldn't go together.
Wow.
Some of the drinks are great. Some of them are too sweet. Some of them, I tell them my parameter is I want a grande drink. I want it to be hot. And I want it to be a coffee drink because I don't want a tea or a chai or anything like that.
Right.
And I will tell you, some of them are great. Some of them are awful. But I let them decide. And I try to use that as an example to myself to try new things in the way I market, in how I position myself, some of the stories I tell on stage. You know, I've got to be growing and changing. And so I'm taking that advice, and that's actually been very interesting. And then the 10th one, you know, the 10th one is you got to believe in yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's what 250 people have given me the same 10 answers as to what they can do to get farther across that gap. And it's not changing. I'm trying to grow that survey to 1,000. And I'm not seeing anything changing as we're getting more people taking the survey. It's pretty universal across the board that people feel there's this gap and they're struggling with how to get across it. And then the people who are getting across it are telling you, this is what I do, and it's simple.
Right, right. So of those there are some that stuck out for me too, and some that I feel I know that they're areas where when I approach them, I will grow more. It's something I've learned. But this being aggressive with gratitude, boy, I really hadn't thought about that. I practice gratitude. I write gratitudes out every day. I try to think about thanking those who have helped me, but being aggressive with attitude is definitely something unique.
Although you should be aggressive with attitude too.
Gratitude. Yes. Gratitude. Yes. And aggressive with attitude. I mean, watch out. But no, aggressive with gratitude. Such an amazing one. I think I'm going to have to test that out and watch out. JP Murray's on here. He better watch out. I'll be aggressive with my
I will say that it's been a reminder for me, you know, to really be thankful of people. Most of my business comes from referrals.
Yeah.
You know, just across the board. I do marketing, I do social media, I do some ads on Facebook and Twitter. And if I go back and look at 9 of my last 10 clients, it's somebody sat in the audience and told somebody else about me. Mm-hmm. And so when people do that, I've just gotten really aggressive with how I let them know it matters. And what's happening is people are doing it again, and not just one time. They're doing it multiple times because the people like to be thanked.
So what about this piece though? So they've identified the things that actually worked. These people who've made it to the other side, who've been successful. What about the people who are still clamoring to get there? And they say, okay, you've told me all 10 of these things and I'm still not doing it. I'm still not quite getting there. Is it a matter of tough love and just like, sorry guys, you just got to do this? Or is there something they're missing?
I think for the people I've talked to, it's really the being aware that you're on a journey. And so even baby steps take you closer. So I have a 15-year-old who her desire for about the last year has been to, at some point in her life, hike the Appalachian Trail. And that's like a 6-month commitment. And I know nothing about it. But the more serious she gets about it, the more we've been doing research. And she's like, oh, after college, I think I'll just go do it by myself. And you're like, you can't go do it by yourself, you know. So I made a deal with her the other day. If she ends up with she's a really smart kid. If she ends up with a full ride scholarship to college, I will make the commitment after college to hike the Appalachian Trail.
Wow.
And then my wife said, be careful what you wish for, because she could probably pull off a full ride scholarship somewhere. And the point of it that she and I have been talking about is sometimes you take 0 days. And I said, what's a 0 day? And she was explaining to me, that's a day where you just don't feel like walking 20 miles. You can't take too many of them. You have to realize that you're on a journey, and you can't take 2 in a row. And so that thought of doing what my daughter calls a through hike, I know nothing about hiker terms, but a long 6-month through hike, you don't do it in sections, you just keep going, involves just remembering that you're going to make, some days you're going to make less progress, some days you're going to make others. And it's like I said about building a scaffolding across that gap, as opposed to a bridge, and just realize that you're never going to get all the way across. And so that's what I've been working on with people. And we actually customized this for the meetings business with NPI Pittsburgh. They brought me in to do their monthly NPI meeting. And I did a special survey on SurveyMonkey where I asked the same questions plus a bunch of questions about the meetings industry. And so we customized this to what's the potential of the meetings you plan, and what do you have to do to get closer to those results that you desire? And it was interesting because it wasn't any different really than talking to the individual. I mean, it was different answers, but it was sort of that same process of creating it as a journey and being really, really focused. And it came back to plans, purpose, and people.
That's so amazing. Plans, purpose, and people. So, okay, if you don't mind, let's transition a little bit to application of this, and also a little bit into the speaking industry. A lot of people who tune in to this, a lot of people who follow me online, and I'm sure your audience obviously is following you online. A lot of times they ask questions about both getting into professional speaking, what the difference is between somebody who's a breakout speaker and a keynote speaker, and the actual different types of roles that speakers play when it comes to a meeting. So while I have you on here, and you kind of know all about it, so while I have you on here, can we go into that a little bit and do a little speaker 101, and then maybe bridge that or scaffold that into talking about how you've grown your own business and what you're trying to do as a speaker?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so let's just start out at the 101 level. So what do people need to understand about the different types of roles that speakers play when they go into working with meeting planners and coming into a meeting?
Well, I think the first thing we have to remember is that a speaker is not a commodity. A speaker isn't a speaker, isn't a speaker. So there are, people call me all the time and they're interested in getting in the speaking business.
Yeah. And
they see the celebrities. So they see Tony Robbins, or they see Colin Powell, or Harvey Mackay, or people who either got famous for something and then became speakers, or people who grew up within the speaking and authoring business and yet became famous beyond just speaking at conferences. So I always say it's like a triangle. The very tippy top is the celebrities, and that's, for the most part, what everybody sees when they think of professional speakers. At the bottom of the pyramid, and that pyramid's really small bottom, but it should be like 400 miles long. People see what I call the industry speakers.
Right.
And these are people who speak for free or for a very low fee because they're there to either promote, a lot of them are consultants, they're there to promote their consulting business. They want to support the industry they're in. It's a lot of CEOs who just like to do it. And they have a little bit of a soapbox so they can speak in their industry. Some people have an agenda that they're trying to sell something. Some people just want to give back. Some people are putting their toe in the water in the speaking business to see what it's like. And so that's the other thing that everybody sees because there's so many of them. But then in the middle of the pyramid, it's what I call the working professional speaker. And these are people who, if you saw them in the airport, if you hadn't seen them speak, you wouldn't know who they were. It's not like Colin Powell where you're like, hey, that's Colin Powell. And there are thousands of them. I think the National Speakers Association has said there's 56,000 people who call themselves speakers. And I think that's worldwide, but I don't have that study in front of me. And yet only like 3,500 people are members of the National Speakers Association. So there's a lot of people. When I started in the business, if you went onto LinkedIn and did a search in Austin, Texas for speakers, who you saw were people who were working a lot as speakers. Now everybody comes up. My accountant comes up and I'm like, why? And he goes, we hired a PR firm who told us we should all list ourselves as speakers because it gives us credibility.
Wow.
So the problem is, as a meeting planner, if you're searching for a speaker, you don't know if someone has spoken one time this year or 65 times this year. Now, I'm not saying I'm good, bad, or indifferent, but I'll tell you, if somebody spoke 65 times, they're probably better.
Right.
Like every 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
They're probably better than the person who spoke once. But so the first thing is it's not a commodity. They're all different. And within those three areas, there's different types of speakers. There's famous industry speakers. There's politicians. There's Olympic athletes. There's people who are famous because they wrote a book. And then down in and when I say down, I don't mean better or worse. I don't think any of these are better or worse. They're just different. So that's the first thing we have to identify is what type of a speaker are we looking for? And what's the purpose? What's that reason that we want to have somebody? And that pendulum I mentioned earlier, lots of times it's this tug of war between content, like, oh, they're so smart, they have a PhD, they did all this research, and wow, they have a great personality, they know how to captivate while they're on stage. And there seems to be this swing that happens every 5 to 10 years where people want really entertaining speakers or they want really smart and they don't care if they suck. And my argument is you don't have to give up one to have the other. There's a lot of really smart people with really good content who know how to captivate an audience and who will put effort into it. So it's knowing who do you want and why. But I think for people on the planner side, I think it's hard to vet a great speaker. I just think it's difficult to find somebody who has a lot of skill because unless you've seen them, you don't know. I mean, even videos can be, if someone did 4 1-hour videos, they're going to have a couple of 10-second clips where they're fabulous.
Well, and now
they put them together.
Now they have these things that come, and I think they're great. If you're a great speaker and you want to get a beautiful video, a beautiful speaker reel, there are these different things that are coming out where it's like, you'll get a little bit of coaching. We're going to record you up on a beautiful stage and have everybody clapping and standing ovations and all of this stuff just to create your speaker reel. And they do like 20 of them all the same day. And you're hoping that they're all really good. But I mean, let's face it. Some of those people have like their little 10-minute thing, and that's it.
So I had a brand new speaker. He'd done 5 speeches in his life, do a small breakout at a big conference. He had 18 people in his breakout.
Yes.
But he asked the meeting planner, and he brought a videographer. He asked, because he didn't have any video of him speaking because he was brand new. He asked the videographer if during the break, when no one was using their general session room, he could go in and use the main stage. And he went onto the main stage of this giant thing and filmed all these little clips of him speaking. And he was so proud of himself because it looked like he was on one of these super produced stages.
Yeah.
And for me, it kind of was like, ooh, there was something disingenuous about doing that. So, my humble brag is that I've given over 600 professional level speeches, and some of those weren't paid and some of those were well compensated over the past decade. And it's kind of like that 10,000 hours theory. I heard one time that a speaker, to be really confident and able to handle everything, has to do 300 speeches.
300
And for a long time,
huh.
That scared me until I crossed the 300 mark, and now I use it as a marketing tool.
And you're like, I love it. Can I steal that? How can I use that? I want to use that. So what do people get wrong about working with speakers? So they have this idea that they're a commodity. We know we need to just do away with that. But what else? What do people get wrong about that? Where are they missing the boat on working with speakers?
I don't know why, but when I go to like MPI and PCMA and ASA, a lot of the other vendors, the consultants, the hoteliers, the catering companies, the decor people, they all seem to be treated as event professionals, event profs, if you were in the Twitter world.
Yes.
Speakers don't seem to have that same welcome mat. And maybe it's because we've destroyed it. Maybe there have been people who were cocky or jerks or whatever. But I think where people miss the mark is they don't look at their speaker as this amazing partner before, during, and after their event. I think that if you're going to, bring a speaker in, their greatest skill shouldn't be getting to the airport 10 minutes after saying, thank you very much.
Right.
You should be working in advance to, have them involved in your social media communities, maybe do a webinar or write an article in advance. They should do more than show up on the stage and speak and leave, unless it's a celebrity. If you bring Bill Clinton in to speak at your conference, I realize he's not going to your happy hour after his speech. And there's Secret Service reasons why. There's all kinds of reasons why. However, if you bring in, a non-famous working speaker, part of what I do as the conference catalyst is I stay the whole day if I'm just doing a keynote, or the whole conference if I'm the MC or doing sort of a hybrid version. And people always come up and go, wow, you're still here. That's so great. The audience loves to talk to speakers, but a lot of people won't rush the stage, especially if there's a line of 5 or 10 people. So if they stay and participate for the rest of the day or the rest of the conference, that's great. So, people say, well, I can't ever get a speaker to stay. Well, tell them that's part of it.
Right.
If you're paying them a lot of money, tell them part of it is you're coming to dinner that night. And if they say no, there's other great speakers out there.
Yeah.
Make them be a partner with them, but let them know this is what I expect of the people I work with. And if they're not willing to do it, you have to be willing to say, okay. I mean, I've had people ask me to do things and I said, I don't know. And they said, well, whoever we hire is going to do that. And I'm like, well, now I have to make a decision. Do I want to participate?
This is an interesting comment that came in from Scott. He says, interesting, because there was just that discussion on Collaborate, which is ASA's, private community, with associations saying that they don't want to pay for the speakers to stay and serve the meals, etc. And I one thing that came to mind while you were talking about that is, a lot of times I'm actually, if I'm ever asked to come speak, I'm actually pushing the conference organizer to do things to promote the presentation ahead of time. Like, can we do a webinar ahead of time? What can we do to promote it? Is there something I can do, like a video plug? And I am surprised at, first, the fact that I have to come up with that. And second, that many times, if I don't go ahead and push through and follow up on it, it won't happen. They don't do it. And I mean, I know it's extra work, but it seems like they'd want more value.
I think because speakers go to so many events, we're also a great tool to share ideas. I mean, people ask me all the time, hey, we want to do a different type of networking lunch. What have you seen? What have you done? I can talk about, because I've been to 50 events this year, I can talk about things that I've seen at other conferences.
Yeah.
So ask the speaker for their ideas. You know, it's interesting when he says they don't want to pay for the speaker's meal. That is such a small cost. I mean, the clients I work with usually want me to stay. I just signed on to do a deal coming up, and it's going to cost them, for me to stay till the end of the day, is going to cost them a second hotel night. And they were like, that's totally fine, because we like the idea of the keynote speaker being there at the end of the day for the cocktail party. And so I speak at 8 a.m, and I'm staying through 6 o'clock that night because they want me to. And I said, okay, but there's that creates a second hotel night, but I was okay to do it. So, you know, some speakers will say no, or they'll charge more. And that's just a decision and a negotiation that you have to make. But I find it interesting that people say, oh, I don't, you know, I've got, now maybe if it's a 50-person deal, one extra meal, that's noticeable. But if it's an 800-person event,
who would notice? I know.
It's a buffet. I don't even know that, you know, I mean, I guess they count the plates, but I don't think you know, it's kind of a rounding error. And if you've got your speaker involved wanting to be a partner to help you create a better event and to really drive sort of that networking and that community feel, you know, then the cost of giving them lunch isn't all that much.
Right. Well, let's get into the good stuff. Let's get into, so you're seeing more and more success this year. You've been building this business, and you do all of these different things. You do the facilitation. You are the keynoter. You are an author of 12 books and probably have another one brewing right now. But
the paradox of potential.
There you go. So let's talk a little bit about building your own business in speaking and applying some of these rules. So what have you been doing, and what kind of results have you been seeing as you've been applying these rules to your own career?
So one of the things I really try to do is I try to be a resource as much as I can. So one of the things I do after I work with a client is, unless I'm booked through a bureau, because that's not my client, essentially. If a bureau books me, that is the bureau's client, and I'm there to support everything for the bureau, because that's a different relationship. But if I'm booked direct, and most of my work is a direct booking, if I'm direct booked, I tell the client afterwards, I say, now that you've had me as your speaker and I've spent the whole day here with your audience, I would love to recommend some people for next year, because I think vetting great speakers is one of the hardest things, because I believe your speaker and your master of ceremonies sets the tone for everything you do. And so I will make 2 or 3 recommendations of other speakers I think are great. And most clients love that. Now, they don't always book my recommendation, but they love the fact, and they say, wow, I wish more speakers, you know, would do that. So I'm always looking for, how can I use my network as a value to them, whether it's speakers, whether it's third-party planners, whether it's hotel ideas in certain cities where I've done conferences. So the first thing I do is I try to create this ongoing relationship where I don't just speak and leave, but I tell people, you can call me forever. And even if you don't want to book me again, 4 years from now, you need a speaker and you don't want to have me back. I understand that. You don't want the same speaker in usually 2 or 3 years, but you can always call me to vet ideas. And I get calls down the line. And sometimes in the course of that conversation, they're like, well, why don't we just have you back? And I'm like, okay, we'll do that too.
You're like, sure. I love that idea.
So repeat business has been a large part of why my business is growing, because I've tried to find ways to stay in touch where I can. Now, not everybody you're going to build a relationship with, and I try not to be a spammy overnagger, but I do try to keep the relationship alive where there's a give and take relationship. So that has helped me grow the business a lot.
So I have a friend who, and I swear it's not me, but I have a friend who is building a business as a facilitator, and he's getting started and has a great reputation and is getting speaking gigs all over the place. And I'll tell you my concern. My concern is this, that you can have a great reputation, you can build these great connections, but you've got to always be building, building, building. And because people don't have the same speaker back year after year, right? You have to get some variety in there. So how have you addressed this? Surely you came across this early on and you were like, oh, wow, even though they love me, they have to wait a little while.
So I'm fortunate. I get more repeat business than some people. There's some people who get a lot more than I do. Part of it is I've changed up what I do. Part of it is my original keynote for years wasn't just about stuff they could take home. It was about how do you make this conference better?
Right.
And that's how I became a master of ceremonies, is I keynoted for years and people were like, you changed the conference because people were more connected while they were here, but we can't have you back next year. And I'm like, oh, I could be your master of ceremonies. And that's how I started sort of the MC thing. So having different products to offer has been good because someone can have me at the thing. If they like me, they can have me facilitate their board meeting. They can have me as the MC for 2 or 3 years in a row. Although even then, it can't be the same person forever because it's not the Thom show. I'm not part of their industry. And I understand that. So a lot of it is having different products, coming up with the paradox of potential as a new, entirely different product line has been really positive for the business because people are, they know me, they like me. And then the other thing is for a speaker, and this sounds, I always cringe when I say this, you have to be good.
Yeah.
And good is subjective. I've gotten those sheets back where they pass them out to everybody and they give 10s or 5s or whatever. And I usually score really well. I'm usually the top speaker or a top speaker wherever I am. But there's always that person who fills out going, why did you hire him? I didn't like his personality. And I've learned, remember the old Billy Crystal movie, Mr. Saturday Night?
Yes.
He was a stand-up comic and he was great. And there was one night where he just crushed it on stage. And afterwards, everybody was giving him all these kudos. And he's like, what was with the people at table 15?
Yeah.
They never smiled. They didn't laugh. All he could think about was the people who didn't love what he did. And so I've learned the hard way to let go of those and just go out and be good. And if I'm good, it'll lead to somebody saying, hey, this speaker sucks less than others. Let's have him back or let's refer him to the next person or whatever. So part of it is that if you're going to be in this business, and it's true if you're going to be a consultant, it's true if you're going to be a third-party planner, if you're a caterer, or if you're in a job, you have to do good work. I mean, that's the game is doing good work. And that's the thing is there's a lot of speakers out there who think they're really good. And my mentor at the National Speakers Association said this to me when I first met him. He said, after you finish speaking, what do you want people to say? And I fell in this trap. I said, I want them to say, great speech. He goes, no, you don't. And I said, yeah, I kind of do. I've got an ego like everybody else. I want to pat on the back. And he said, no, Thom, because we live in a polite society. Imagine for a second that you're at a speech and the speaker is just okay. He or she is just, you don't hate it, you're not walking out. But when they say in conclusion, you're thinking, well, thank God.
Yeah.
Now you're at the cocktail party and you reach for a piece of shrimp and someone else reaches for the same piece of shrimp and you look over and you make eye contact and it's that speaker. And it's just the two of you. No one else is there. And he or she smiles at you and you look at them. What do you say to them?
You were amazing. Yeah, that's what you want. No, you don't. Yeah. So, okay.
But that's what we live in, a polite society. Yeah. So even if you're just okay, people are saying great job. And I had one person tell me one time, oh, I would never give a compliment unless they were great. I'm like, so what would you say? And they go, I'd pick out that one story and say, I loved the story about your speaker, about your sister. And I said, do you know what the speaker hears when you say that? Great speech.
Yeah.
So the only way we can know if we're good as a speaker, and I argue in all our professions, is if people come up to you afterwards and say something of a derivative of what else can you do for me? So if people come up to me and say, okay, where can I buy your books? Will that speech work for a law firm? My wife runs an association. I have to introduce you to her because you'd be perfect. That to me means I'm doing a good job. If I'm getting spin-off work, or they, even if they say, can I pick your brain? Nobody ever went up to somebody mediocre and said, can I buy you a cup of coffee? I want to learn more.
Yeah.
So anything that translates to what else can you do for me leads me to believe that I'm doing good work. And so I try not to fall into the, hey, great speech, but I try to look at, am I spinning off new business?
Right.
And if I'm spinning off new business, I know I'm doing something right. But the other trick for a speaker is you can't just say, yeah, I'm good, because the styles change. I mean, it used to be, these fire and brimstone come down and hand out tablets to the audience and people go, wow. I think it's more interactive now. I think in the last 5 years, what audiences want is a peer. They want someone who can tell stories about their own life and the things that they've done that they can see themselves in, rather than Moses coming down from the mountain with the tablets. And so I think the old day of the sage from the stage is over. Mm-hmm. And so you have to change with it. You have to change your style, because the cheese is moving, as I said earlier. So I think that that's something I've done. If you watched a video of me 8 years ago and you saw me on stage, day after tomorrow, I'll be speaking to 800 people from a mortgage company, the top salespeople in a national company. That speech from 8 years ago and that speech this Thursday will be drastically different in the way I think of the audience and the way I just emote to the audience, the interactiveness of the speech. So I think you got to be willing to change as the business changes.
How do you prepare? I know that at this point it's, you've probably got this whole routine, but what really makes it go over the top for you and helps you to crush it?
So first of all, I'm always looking for fresh stories. Mm-hmm. So, my brother said one time, you don't talk about me from the stage. And my kids said, watch out, everything is a possibility. Anything can happen. I try new stories. I still go to a Toastmasters club. People are like, you're a professional speaker. Why do you go to a Toastmasters club? Because I can try 7-minute stories.
That's a great idea.
If someone wants me to speak for, locally, I won't do it out of town, but if someone wants me to speak locally for a group that has no budget, does like Young Men's Business League, I used to be a member of, and they do a lunch twice a month. Of course I'll speak for them because I can try all new material, because if I'm just okay, it's not going to hurt. I can't try new material on Thursday when they're paying me a fee. Mm-hmm. So I prepare by speaking. Like I said, I've given 65 presentations this year, and I try to learn from everyone. I video all the ones that I can, and I watch it, and I still cringe, thinking, smile, Thom, smile, do something, move. So I think you constantly have to realize that, you're not the best. And I'm really active in the National Speakers Association. Mm-hmm. A couple of years ago, Mark Scherenbrock closed the conference with a speech where I leaned to the person next to me and said, I have to quit the industry because I can never be that good.
Wow.
And there was never anything that was that inspiring. I mean, he's such a master storyteller that he made me up my game. And I know I got better by watching people who are just that great.
Yeah. I love that. I love that story because, I think that even looking for stories in your day-to-day life and looking for stories and examples, even if you're not a speaker, this is really, really helpful for people to do because we learn from storytelling. And so even if you're not thinking about getting up in front of 800 people, but instead you're just thinking about telling a compelling story that's going to get your point across and help you to get further on what it is that you're trying to achieve at work. Having a good story that you're able to tell so that people understand and they go on that journey with you is something that can compel you towards success and propel you towards success.
Well, and they've done research. It's stories that stick in our mind. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things that, when man sat around the campfire 2,000 years ago and the leaders of the tribe or the community were teaching the next generation, they didn't pass out PowerPoints and graph charts. Mm-hmm. They told stories about how you hunt and how you farm and how you move to the tribe and, all this stuff. It was all done through story. I mean, generations of mankind were educated through story. Our minds are wired to remember a story. So when I teach people presentation skills, I say every point, every graph has to have some sort of story. And people remember, I was getting on a plane last year and I'm putting the thing in the overhead, my bag in the overhead. And this guy said to me, did you speak at New York Life once? I had to think about it. It had been like 7 years earlier. Like, I don't even think I was a professional speaker yet. I'm like, yeah, I said, that was my first day of work. And he turned to his wife and told her a story that I told in the keynote. And I was like, oh my God. And if you've ever heard me speak before, it was the story about my daughter, Kate, and how we found the doctor who essentially saved her life when she was a newborn. And that was a point about why you treated people well. He turned to his wife and recited the story exactly, and then turned to me and said, how is Kate? And it was like, how do you remember that 7 years later?
I actually remember that story. You were the conference catalyst, I think, at Great Ideas, and it was in Colorado Springs. And I remember that story. Yes.
People always people remember the stories that you tell. So what I tell people is even if you're not a speaker, keep a story journal of things that happen to you or things that happen in your office or that you see happen at a conference, things that are relative to your career or your industry. Because if you ever have to give a speech, you can go and just pull out those stories and just keep them in a journal somewhere.
Wow. You know, a little while back, I started trying to collect stories, and it's actually harder than it sounds because I find myself telling stories all the time, not like lying. That's not a euphemism for lying. but I find myself telling stories, and but the connecting point, the part that I don't do so well, is it makes sense when it's in the flow of a conversation and I'm getting a point across. It's not necessarily, I'm not as good. I'm getting better, but I'm not as good as at being able to connect it to a point that I'm trying to make, so that that story is one of my stories that is an example of sticking with something, or an example of a time I failed and then overcame it, or you know what I mean? And I'm trying to like group them in my head, sort of like catalog them, but it's hard. It's a different kind of thing.
And you can't tell a story just to tell a story. It really has to match the point.
Yeah.
And so if I have a point, I literally will go through, where I store stories. Or I actually saw a speaker who said something very interesting, and that is, think about all the places that you've ever lived or places that you've been on vacation, and then walk your mind through those different places you've lived and think about something that happened there, and just keep thinking about stories. So think of the first house you live in and just think of what happened there. And then was there a person, was there a place, was there a thing? And you just keep going through all the places you've lived or places you've worked or whatever, until all of a sudden you get an aha moment. And I've had to do exercises like that because I have a great point.
I love that.
But I'm like, well,
I just came up with one as you were talking. I just came up with one, and now I'm like, ooh, I need to investigate that. Yay. Well, that is so fantastic. We're nearing toward the end of our time, and I think I could talk to you forever. I have so many more questions. But I want to bring us back around to talking a little bit about the paradox of potential, and bringing people to the point where they can take that next step. So understanding that whoever's listening to this right now, whoever is listening to this later, we're all coming from different places. But if somebody's listening to this right now and they want to learn from the paradox of potential and make the right next step, what should they do?
I think they need to go back and identify, do they have a plan? Do they really set goals? Are they clear? Do they know what success looks like? Because I think so often success, or the person who could bring us success, could sit down right next to us at a conference. And if we don't know that we need a certain company or a certain job title or a certain type of person, we introduce ourselves, we totally miss it. We need to know what success looks like, and then we need to reverse engineer it. Mm-hmm. So goal setting isn't wishing and hoping and dreaming. It's actually reverse engineering the steps you need to take. So I think that plan is really important. And I think being clear on your why. What is your purpose? Why do you want to reach those goals? I've set a ton of goals in my life that I couldn't answer that question on the why. And then one of two things happened. I either reached them and they were shallow or unfulfilling, or I never reached them at all because I didn't really have a purpose. I didn't even know why I was doing it. Just, I want to make X amount of money.
Right.
Well, yeah, we all want to make. I want to make $1 million. Well, I didn't make $1 million. Why? Because I didn't really know. I didn't have a purpose. It just sounded like a big number that somebody gave.
Sounded fancy.
And then the third thing is go back to people. Remember that all opportunities in your life come from people. And if you're more of an introvert, it's okay. Being an introvert doesn't mean you don't like people. It means you get drained from big crowds. It's where you get your energy levels. Extroverts thrive in a big crowd. Introverts don't. Be true to who you are. I mean, don't force yourself into situations where you're not comfortable. But if you know you have to work harder at doing the networking thing, then make sure that you've thought it through, you've worked it out, you've given yourself, I always say to my introvert friends, my wife included, I always say, when you go to one of these things, make it a numbers game. I have to meet 3 new people and have like conversations that last at least 7 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And if I meet 3 of them, I can go home. And I've literally had people come up going, after 3 people, it wasn't so hard. I stayed the rest of the night. So, make it a numbers game so that you know why you're meeting people, you have a purpose and a plan for meeting them. And then you merge those 3 things together. And then also realize that it's okay that you're not reaching all your goals. One of the things I found is that some people, They have other priorities. It's not, their purpose isn't work. So they're taking care of aging parents. They have a sick spouse. They have a kid who's going through something like maybe Kate went through 15 years ago. It's okay. If it's not your priority right now, don't beat yourself up. I had a woman at this thing I did said thank you, because we talked a lot about that. She said, thank you, because I'm taking care of a sick aunt. And when I'm with my aunt, I feel guilty about work. When I'm at work, I feel guilty about my aunt. She goes, she told me in an email, she goes, I went and met with my boss, who's been very supportive. And he said, don't feel guilty about work. He's given her, the nod that it's okay. And she said it was the first time in 6 months she wasn't beating herself up.
Wow.
Don't beat yourself up if it's not your priority. You have to be honest with who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, and make sure your ladder's against the wall you want, not one that your spouse or your kids or your mom and your dad or society has told you to put it against. Because I'll tell you, I put my ladder against the wrong wall for 25 years. And, that's bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. See, what you just said there, I could go for another hour talking with you just based off of that. So this has been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thom, what's the best way for people to find you online and connect with you?
So I'm all over all the social buttons, if you will. But you can find me at thomsinger.com, and that's THOMSINGER.com. But Kiki, I'll tell your audience a little secret. If later all you remember is Thom Singer and you spell it THOMSINGER.com, you'll still get to my website, because I own Thom Singer spelled THOM Singer, and I own THOMSINGER. It'll just redirect you to the right place.
How awesome. See, that's a man who's thinking. He's a smart guy. All right.
Well, because people forget that it's THOM. So long ago, I picked up both.
Yeah. With a name like Kiki, I don't run into that very often. They usually find me somehow. So for all of you, thank you for listening and joining with us today in Association Chat, learning about the paradox of potential. If you find this content valuable, please subscribe to the podcast, share on Facebook, leave a comment in the chat or on the Association Chat website. And as a reminder, you can always catch each week's live episode as an audio podcast on Fridays, on iTunes, on Google Play, on Stitcher. Just look for it and you'll find it. Until next time, everyone, keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much, Thom.